Israel's Mossad reportedly enlisting Iranian security agents to plant explosives in the Tehran guest house where the leader of Hamas was staying at the time of his death. The new report from the Telegraph does cite sources as revealing that the original plan was to assassinate Ismail Haniyeh when he attended the funeral for Iran's president. That was back in May. However, the plan was eventually scrapped because there were too many other people in the building at the time. Haniyeh, the chief of Hamas, was killed in an explosion on Wednesday in Iran's capital hours after attending the new president's inauguration. Reports do indicate about 2 months ago, explosives had been placed in several rooms of the Iranian compound where Haniyeh would be staying, and they appear to be detonated somehow from abroad. Iran's supreme leader has ordered a direct attack on Israel in retaliation for that killing, despite no actual claim of responsibility being made. Israel's military did confirm, however, that it carried out a strike hours earlier in Lebanon's capital of Beirut, killing Hezbollah's most senior military commander, the second in command of the terror group. A lot to discuss here on this Saturday, so I do want to bring in Mark Chandler, Director of Government Relations and Professor of Practice at Coastal Carolina University, also a former senior defense intelligence official. Thank you so much, as always, Mark, for taking the time to be here with us.
You're quite welcome, Josh, and good morning.
Yeah, and a lot to talk about might be an understatement here, but I do want to talk about that report that is now coming out that the Mossad had actually hired some Iranian agents to make this all happen, the death of Hamas's leader. What do you make of all of that overall?
Well, first off, Josh, myself included and a lot of experts the other day said Israeli airstrike, Israeli missile strike, because this was in the heart of Tehran. So when you look at that and you step back and you start to see more information come out, this has a high degree of plausibility that this happened. So what seems to have taken place, if we look at Mossad, and Mossad has operated inside Israel going after the Iranian nuclear program several times over the last many years. So when we look at this, it seems as though, if this does play out, that Hamas was able to compromise some senior level security personnel inside the IRGC and Iranian security services, because that's who was responsible for the security of this compound, this VIP compound. So in doing so, if they were able to get those munitions in there, those explosives, and set them to be remotely detonated, either via cell phone charges or, some sort of satellite relay, that would then show, how they did it. IRGC has said that is one course of action. They're starting out today. They're releasing some information, say it was a short-range projectile that was launched. So I think what you're seeing is a lot of scrambling by the IRGC and internal Iranian security. But I will say this, regardless of the method, Mossad is one of the best practitioners of this type of intelligence operation in the world. And so for them to be able to pull this off, either compromising internal Iranian security, that shows a great gap in the Iranian internal security. And I think it should start to send a little bit of instability across for that Iranian regime.
I want to talk a little bit about the potential for a ceasefire hostage release deal. This has been ongoing for months now as the talks have been continuing over in Qatar as well as in Cairo, pretty much everywhere at this point. Now, with the death of Haniyeh, I would imagine that it kind of changes the dynamic because if I had to guess, Sinwar is probably in charge now of whether there is a ceasefire hostage release deal, at least on Hamas's part.
Yeah, now, when we go back and we look at Haniyeh, he was the political spokesman. He was the leader overall of Hamas. But they rule in sort of a Shura Council concept, and Sinwar had a lot of input to that. So what I think you're going to see is the talks are dead. Now, I say that from Hamas perspective. Israel today or tomorrow is sending another delegation to Cairo. The head of Mossad actually is going to continue those negotiations. But if we go back in time and we look at what Sinwar has done, it was just a few months ago, he told Haniyeh not to continue the negotiations because Hamas had Israel right where they wanted. They had them destabilized. They had the world opinion against Israel, and Sinwar felt confident enough to stop those negotiations. Just about 2 weeks ago, Hamas said the negotiations are dead anyway. So I'm not sure. The dynamic absolutely will change because they have to communicate with Sinwar and how he perceives his ability to continue the fight inside Gaza. And don't forget the West Bank. So when you look at that, I think communications are going to continue, but now Sinwar is being put into, I would say, back into a corner because Israel has sent a strong message. They are following through on the promise they made several months ago to go after Hamas leaders wherever they are and to take them out. And I think that sends a message to Sinwar that maybe, and I would put this in the less than 50% category, that Sinwar may take notice and say, maybe now is the time to do it. That's a minority thought. But Hamas, they are going to strike back. It started this morning with an attempted terrorist attack from the West Bank this morning that Israel thwarted with an airstrike.
And I want to talk more about the U.S. involvement here because the Pentagon did say Friday that it will deploy additional fighters and Navy warships to the Middle East. So is that essentially a scare tactic to prevent Iran and its proxies from attacking Israel? Is it kind of like a scarecrow type situation?
Well, yes and no. And I say yes because the U.S. is trying to position forces into the region, but politically, and this kind of tips your hand, they told Israel and they told the world essentially that they're doing this for defensive purposes. And so we came to the aid of Israel in the April 14th Iranian attack of over 300 missiles and UAVs. So with our aircraft and some of our destroyer ships out in the Eastern Mediterranean, we were able to thwart that attack. So we're setting up defensively for that. And so I think that message is strong that we will support. But when we look at the forces we have in the region, Josh, we don't have a carrier readily available. The closest carrier is the Ford, and she is located well south of the Arabian Peninsula in the Gulf of Oman, and she is on her way out. It'll take her at least 2 days to get into position with aircraft and some of her strike forces that can do air defense. We do have 2 destroyers in the Eastern Med, so that will help out with air defenses. For Israel, we have the WASP Amphibious Ready Group with the 24th MEU, that's Marines. Not much on air defense, but if we have to evacuate Americans, we're prepared for that. Now, the SecDef did order the USS Lincoln, but she's over in the Pacific region, and so it's going to take her several days to get in place. So as we look at this, it's defensive in nature, but I don't know about the deterrent value because we have to prove to our enemies for deterrence to work, we have to be willing to do that. And even when Americans were killed months ago, it took us a while to respond. So defensive, yes. I'm not sure the deterrent value at this time.
We also heard that intel provided to Israel does say that Hezbollah is being urged to move out of Beirut and move to other areas, possibly within Lebanon there. Is that their way of hiding out after we know that, of course, the second in command was killed by Israel in an attack there in Beirut?
Well, I think what you're seeing is standard military practice on that. When you know an attack is coming, you're going to try to disperse your command and control and your leadership. Now, Hezbollah has areas all throughout Lebanon that they can disperse to. They're big into the Bekaa Valley, which is north and central to the east of southern Lebanon and near the Syrian border. So they have a lot of operating locations there. They have an extensive tunnel network in southern Lebanon and in central Lebanon in the Bekaa Valley, also tunnels leading across into Syria. So you're starting to look at where they're going to disperse. You do that for 2 reasons. One, you're expecting further attacks. 2, you're preparing for an attack and you want to reposition yourself before you conduct an attack because you know Israel will strike back. So I think we're starting to see that. Now, having said that, Israel knows these locations. In a previous life, I've been up to some of these certain locations, worked with the Israeli Defense Forces, and they have mapped out on a strike list where Hezbollah's primary positions and alternate positions are. So while they're moving, I don't think it's going to necessarily be as secure as Hezbollah wants it to be. As a matter of fact, earlier today, Israel struck 2 airfields near the Syrian border further north in Lebanon. That was transshipment points, some hideout locations, and also where Hezbollah has launched attack UAVs against Israel in the past. So you're starting to see some of the movement taking place and some preemption by Israel, sending a further message that they can find Hezbollah wherever they go.
And this is actually some video just coming in from the Israel War Room, where the IDF has released footage of the strike that eliminated Ali Azia Abed Ali, a senior Hezbollah terrorist there. This was over in southern Lebanon. So we continue to see these strikes, and the IDF and Israeli military, of course, releasing some of that video. I want to talk about the Houthis as well, because Yemen's Houthi rebels vowing a, quote, military response against Israel following the killing of Hamas's leader. So my question for you, what are the Houthis capable of compared to Hamas and Hezbollah? I feel as though we have discussed this quite a bit over the last several months, but what do we know now about their overall capabilities?
Well, you know, a lot of underestimation of the Houthis' capability has taken place ever since October. And so we saw the destabilizing effect that the Houthis have had on global shipments, the economy. And so you start to look at that, but not really a threat against Israel. That kind of was taken off the board a couple of weeks ago when the Houthis were successfully launched a UAV attack against Tel Aviv. It caused some damage, and I think 1 death in that attack. So that starts to put on notice a further attack from the Houthis. Now, they don't have the numbers. They don't have the full capability of, say, Iran, the Iranian-backed Shia militia located in Iraq and Syria, or Hezbollah for sure. But if we discount the Houthis as a threat, I think that's going to be a mistake that Israel can make, or the U.S., because they can damage and they can hit Israel's. I would call this, in military terms, we call this a harassing attack. We have to pay attention to it. We can't let a missile, a stray missile or UAV get through, but they can also destabilize and cause us to spread our focus by increasing the attacks in the Red Sea, Bab el-Mandeb, and Gulf of Aden. So that's going to force military assets to focus down there to keep the shipping going through that area. So not to be underestimated, but they can definitely mess up how we're going to prepare holistically for a likely onslaught and coordinated attack.
All right. Mark Chandler, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here and break it all down. Anything else you want to add about any of this? And I know there are a lot of topics here, but anything you want to add before I let you go?
Well, Josh, I just want to say that we are very close to open warfare and a broad spread of warfare across the entire region. Right now, the ball is in Iran and Hezbollah's court. You know, depending on how extensive they strike back, will drive how Israel responds to that. And I think both the Hezbollah regime and leadership and the Iranian regime and leadership are kind of trying to balance that. Let me be very clear. They will strike back. How big that is depends and drives the Israeli response. So we could go to open warfare, but I think they are going to calculate for Hezbollah regime survival, Iranian regime survival. They're going to hold off of what they could do. There will be damage in Israel. Hopefully not deaths, but there will be damage to that. But as long as those two organizations, Iran and its proxies, can keep the Middle East destabilized and keep the U.S. and Israel off balance and the U.K. off balance, that plays right into Iran's hands. And it drags this out and makes it a lot longer conflict. And strategically, because, you know, I like to throw that in there, you know, this is also playing into Russia and China's and North Korea's hands, because the trouble we're having getting a carrier in there is a symptomatic of how we are going to be challenged globally with just what we look like a regional fight here. So this is helping Iran's allies in addition to Iran's goals of destabilization.
Mark, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. We appreciate it.
Josh, my pleasure. And hopefully we've added a little bit of clarity to a very complex and dangerous situation today.
You always do. Thanks again.
Thank you.